Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is, yes! The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals strikes down California gun control law, specifically the high-capacity magazine ban, right? For those who are unaware, in California, there has been this law making it illegal to own any magazine for a firearm that contains more than 10 rounds, right? Saying that that's only school shooters need more than 10 rounds in a weapon, right? But as I covered in a video last year, there was a judge, Judge Benitez. I believe this was down in SoCal somewhere, and it was Duncan was the defendant, and she basically defended her home with I believe an AR-15 and had a 30-round magazine, and the rest of the country, or at least in the red states, called a normal capacity, rifle magazine with 30 rounds. And so she was basically using one hand to fire rounds at the intruders, at the attackers, and there were multiple of them, while she had in her other hand the telephone while she was calling the police and calling for help. And so essentially, because she had only one hand, if she was not able to have that that regular 30-round magazine, she would have potentially died, because she would have run out of ammo. She wouldn't have been able to reload. It showed that there are very plausible situations that pertain to the Second Amendment for law-abiding firearms owners who are just, there are just situations you can't necessarily predict. When people say, you don't need more than 10 rounds, like, who the fuck are you? Where do you even get off trying to tell somebody what they need in a life or death situation? It's a total joke, There's large drum magazines, which are awesome. Those, there's at least a case for regulating those, and we'll see what happens as a result of this decision. But, in my mind, the Second Amendment is pretty clear that, the right of the people to, keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right? It's pretty simple. For the purpose of maintaining a well-regulated militia. Well-regulated means functional and competent. And a militia, back in the days of the Constitution signing, the militia was all citizens, private citizens who owned firearms, right? If you own a gun and you are proficient with it, then you are by de facto part of the militia, right? If there was some sort of occupying force or invasion scenario, or, even just a natural disaster. We've definitely had our fair share of, emergency situations across the spectrum this year in the United States and around the world. And there's all different kinds of situations that could present themselves, and by being armed, you are taking that responsibility of your safety into your own hands. And a lot of people in this year also have been realizing that's always been the case. It always will be the case, even whether we have the most robust, ethical, conflict-free police force, or we have basically total corruption, something like the city of Seattle or the city of Chicago, or really any major Democrat-run city. It's all just garbage. And you see this, just as a side tangent real quick, you see just the completely divergent results when it comes to this COVID pandemic, nonsense, is that the places that are administered by mayors and governors who are on the red team, again, not to say all Republicans are great, but at least Republicans still maintain competence and objective reality and logic as virtues, right? Whereas on the left, whether it's the fake left neoliberals or the real left hard commie idiots, they don't even treat that as a virtue anymore. So it's like there's something to be said about just trying, right? Again, do or do not, there is no try, but, in a world of incompetent, nihilist commie morons, at least you got to give it a try. It's worth something, especially when nobody's even trying. And so that is really what it's about. People taking into their own hands their personal safety responsibility for safety of their family. And, a huge component of the massive amounts of new gun buyers in 2020 are black Americans. And they're basically, they're taking safety in their own hands. There's all these riots down in their neighborhoods, by people saying that Black Lives Matter. Meanwhile, more people have been killed by these rioters, the peaceful protesters, if you're a moron. then have been killed, then have unarmed black men been killed by police in the last like 3 years, right? So as we've covered, everybody knows whose brain is still alive that this is a total charade. But it's very nice to see all, we're at like the highest gun registration tally in recorded history since they started recording it. And it's so silver lining, to all the advances toward communism that they're trying to make, is that the silver lining is that gun control is dead in the water. And that is very, very consequential, because if they fail on that point, they by necessity will not be able to complete any of the more extreme and draconian other options. You can't implement, basically any sort of microchip, mandatory vaccine type reality unless you disarm the citizens, unless you make strong inroads to have a legal, plausible, cover to going in and basically disarming them, when it is, again, it's the Second Amendment. It is a core aspect of American identity, is the private ownership of firearms. And so, essentially, returning to the lead, to the point of the story, that decision by Judge Benitez of last year essentially stayed, like a hold was put on its implementation, because it was already being challenged by the communist, California state government, specifically Attorney General Javier Becerra, I think, or Xavier Becerra, I don't know. Point is, he's a communist, and he didn't like the fact that Benitez said, you know what? This magazine ban is totally against the Constitution. So Judge Benitez, seeing where the winds were going and knowing that they would basically strike it down and try and push further in the other direction, issued a stay on the implementation of the order. And it had a specific time and date on it. So as a result, there was this week where it was legal to buy high-capacity magazines, regular capacity magazines, if you're in California. And so I took the opportunity to buy about 10 30-round AR-15 magazines for regular 223. Perhaps I'll do another build down the line of doing AR-10 and just be my absolute, zombie troll killing gun. But we'll see. That's gotta take care of higher priority items before I get back to building recreational firearms. But in any case, so there was a 3-panel judge of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals who reviewed this ruling and to determine whether or not it should be put into effect and implemented and made the law of the land, or whether or not it should be cast down. And they absolutely said, no, this is upheld. It was a 2-1 decision, right? The judge appointed by Clinton voted against it, and the one was appointed by Trump, and the other was appointed by George W. Bush. And they agreed that this is absolutely a valid decision, and it should be implemented. And so now this is just glorious. This is California. It has the majority, rule by these communist cities, but the majority of California by territory is very conservative, and it's, probably more red than a lot of red states at this point. The red counties of California are possibly more red than Texas. We just also have cannabis, and, it changes your dynamic a little bit, right? But that's where it's at. And so this is a very, very good sign, because this is, again, it's a Court of Appeals ruling. So it either gets accepted where it is, we play it as it lays, or Chief Justice John Roberts of the Supreme Court, who has been very, very, very reluctant to hear any gun control cases, which is unfortunate, because now we actually have more judges who would be willing to, rule in the favor of liberty and the real, true American interest, rather than the fake commie American interest, which thinks that the emotionality of, neurotic, liberal housewives just staring at their television and being dictated reality to, these feelings and whims of neurotic people should never take priority over sound, reasoned logic by people who actually have, a stake in the game. And, that's kind of the reason why back in the day, only landowning people could vote, because it was the only real way to determine whether or not people have skin in the game, whether or not they have a fundamental vested interest. And I'm not necessarily saying we should do that, but if we could make land ownership so hyper accessible and affordable, I mean, maybe it would be land, out in the boonies, but if you had the will to just go and be sovereign, and you were willing to develop land almost like the old frontier, but if we were to really reanalyze the land, geography, terrain, and real estate situation on this planet, we would find that we are not even remotely close to overpopulated on this planet. We just have obsolete systems that are getting overloaded because of corruption, lack of foresight, and just general incompetence. But realistically, if we were to take true inventory of the land on this planet, I mean, the amount that even we are paying, to live in a rental house right now with a few bedrooms is, I mean, we could buy probably a few acres in certain parts of the world, a decent amount of land. And, if the technology is there and there's this open source distribution and fulfillment platform, especially with airships, you don't even need highways. You don't even need train, rails. You can basically pre-assemble, prefabricate entire structures and literally drop them off where you want them, right? Go and just put a foundation pad and then essentially drop the structure, almost like how they do with mobile homes, but with trucks, but we could literally deliver them anywhere in the world. And so that kind of technology, again, treating this planet as almost like a moon or a planet that we've landed on, and really analyzing, our resource situation, and why, again, I'm an environmentalist, but not because I'm afraid of carbon dioxide, the molecule at the basis of all life, is somehow a poison or a toxin at 0.4% of the atmosphere, versus we should just use resources effectively and efficiently. And that's just a good idea. That's called economics, which means the naming of the home, right? Of taking names and identity of all the things that exist within the home and seeing how there are the inputs and the outputs, right? Oikos is Greek word for home. And so, yeah, the naming of the home. And so it's very, very good to see that these judicial appointments have lasting effect. And, again, for all the people who are sour on Trump, from the right side, saying he's been ineffective and he's, a Zionist shill and all this, it's like, by their actions you shall know them. And, judge a tree by its fruit. And I would say that by the fruit of Trump's judicial appointments from the Supreme Court on down, I'd say it's very good reason in and of itself to give him another 4 years to really complete this cycle. Because if we just had the Ninth Circuit, which has been so locked up communist for many, many years, and have given us all of the gun control laws that we have out here, right? Because a law can't really make it into effect if there's actual judicial review by competent, strict constructionist judges. But if you lock it all up with commies appointed by Clinton and Obama, then basically you can just, they'll just abrogate reality, right? It's just amazing how, how political the judicial appointments are. And you would think, in ignorance that, these are judges and they're running by a neutral, objective framework. It's like, yeah, if they're appointed by the red team, even old W, and his guy can see what the truth is. But it's like these, strong women of color get appointed by Obama, and basically they just literally their whole career is just one long arc of just, overturning constitutional freedoms and leading us greater and greater into socialism and communism. But luckily, the Trump phenomenon did happen. We have not started a new war. We have not, it's, again, people sometimes they set the standard. It's like, oh, well, Trump hasn't revealed 9/11 yet, and he hasn't shut down the banks, and he hasn't abolished the Federal Reserve. It's like, again, these are the wishes of delusional children. Again, I agree with you on a lot of the priorities, on pretty much all of them. But to think that that would be an effective use of power strategically, given the situation at hand, I mean, you're a petulant child to think such a thing, right? I want 12 million cones of ice cream now, and I'm going to hold my breath until I get it. It's like, all right, bud, hold your breath. But what I said from the very beginning is if you're expecting Trump to be, philosophically eloquent and consistent, then you're not necessarily going to have a great time. But if you're expecting things to just get done, then you may just have a wonderful time. And that is exactly what we have seen, is things getting done. Do you remember when we were going to go to war with North Korea, right? And Trump just basically called him out and said fire and fury, and then basically they were meeting together and they're friends. And again, that can't come to its conclusion because of China, right? North Korea is the stepchild of China, right? And so until the situation with China is resolved, the whole thing with North Korea is still a sideshow. But to see that overture towards détente, and yet things have fallen apart a little bit here, since then, but the impetus to peace, right? The impulse to peace. Even, again, John F. Kennedy was very much a narcissist and a misogynist in many ways, but he, even in his ego, he wanted to be known as a president who sought peace, right? Even in a false sort of ethic, if a person is actually governed by their ego, which is at least in some way moored with, objective values, then they can actually do good things because they just want to be known for doing good things. But I think that Trump is beyond that. I think he actually does want peace, and I think he understands that sometimes the shortest distance between 2 points is not a straight line. It's an entirely roundabout, totally convoluted path, because you're dealing with a tactical and strategic situation in addition to just a geographic one. You have to know that there are things in your way that are trying to stop you, and Trump understands very well, and as he points out, it's like everybody loved him. He was in like 75 rap videos, and then he ran for president, and basically everybody says he's a racist and whatnot. But, again, we've covered ad nauseum how, just malleable the leftist worldview is, and how it literally, they will claim entirely whole cloth new realities that are completely, false to justify what they feel should be the case, right? Russiagate point in case. No real evidence, but just this narrative that was spoon-fed to people for years and years and years at this point. And people who I know who actually, I would consider their opinion, rational in many ways, but some people still believe that there was validity to the thing because they were just repeatedly told for years and years and years. And it's like, still they can't wrap their head around that they're not just fibbing, they're not just bending the truth, they are outright professional liars. And their job is mind control and manufacturing consensus where none would otherwise exist. Right? That is their purpose. It is propaganda as enunciated by Edward Bernays 100 years ago, masterfully executed. But at the same time, evolution, in line with the principles of God and objective reality, continues to advance apace. And so we are, as a species, as a population, as individuals, most of all, have been waking up to this reality. And we've been able to greater and greater identify the structures of control. And so again, it's like turning on a light in a room. You'll be bumping around and banging your head and tripping and skinning your knee until you just find the light switch and you turn on the light. But, you can also generate light from within yourself by being in accordance with that greater vortex, right? And become the illuminated being. What the Illuminati claim to be, right, but in truth is the activated human in alignment with God, with all of their cells essentially working together as a perfect union. And that is essentially what we form in the kingdom of heaven, is us as the cells of God. We are the gods of our cells and the cells of the gods, or, the singular, the cells of God, the God of our cells. And so when we all work together, that is essentially what we will create, is this great, grand society, this great being of us acting together. And we all know, all the cells know why they're doing it, why morality exists, and why we're all following this pattern, because it is the optimized pattern. And so that is what we're reaching for, maybe a little lofty in 2020, but not lofty for 2100, I'll tell you that much. And, the fact that we now have the Ninth Circuit moving this far in 2020 back towards rationality is a very, very, very good sign, my brothers. And so I guess that's mainly what I wanted to talk about today. I'll talk more about the political situation, later on. My camera case broke, so I got a new one. That's why I didn't make a video for a few days. So hopefully the audio is better on this one, because the microphone port is a little more exposed. But anyway, I guess that's all for today. Hope you guys have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.